Montana Territory. Autumn of 1874, the wind was sharp with coming snow when the townsfolk of Red Elk branded Josephine Ellard a liar. She stood barefoot in the mud behind the doctor's office, dress soaked from crossing the creek where she had slipped with the tiny bundle in her arms. Her baby was already cold, dead. The boy had been born too early, too small. And when she told them what she had seen, that the baby's breathing had stopped in the night, and someone had tampered with the door, they did not believe her. They said she was unwell, hysterical, that grief made women see things. She is lying, someone muttered, trying to cover what she did to that poor child. Josephine did not scream, did not cry. She stood there, clutching the shawl she had wrapped around the baby, staring at the doctor's boots as he turned away from her. They buried her son Kellen in a corner of the cemetery by the pine trees, beside the unmarked graves. She was not allowed to speak at the service. By winter, she was alone on the edge of town, living in a half-frozen cabin with no livestock, no husband, and no child. Her husband had died of fever 2 months before the baby. No one came to check on her. No one knocked, until the cowboy came. His name was Yates Kessler. He rode into Red Elk with a herd of rough-looking cattle and a quiet air about him. He was not from town. He had a deep voice and wore a brown coat lined with rabbit fur. Folks said he had worked the Dakotas, Wyoming, even down near Santa Fe. He did not talk much. Josephine saw him first at the general store, exchanging coin for nails and lamp oil. He did not look at her like the others did, that wary glance full of whispered judgment. He just nodded, then turned back to what he was doing. The second time she saw him, he was standing at her fence line. "You got a fire inside?" he asked. She blinked from the porch. "Why?" "Because your chimney's smoking wrong. Means it's clogged or wet. Got a minute? I can fix it." She did not answer right away, but she stepped inside, leaving the door open behind her. He followed. He fixed the chimney, then the stove, then the broken window pane she had stuffed with cloth. Bit by bit, he mended the house without asking for anything. She offered him soup one evening. He sat on the floor near the hearth, long legs stretched out, hands curled around the tin bowl. He did not ask about the grave marker she had carved from driftwood out back, but he looked at it through the window. He saw. "You do not talk much," she said. He shrugged. "That bother you?" "No. Too many words can get twisted." He glanced at her then. "Yeah, they can." A week later, he rode by again, this time with a sack of flour and a new kettle he said he had no use for. That night, she told him about the door, how it had been open when she woke, how someone had been there, she was sure of it, how Kellen had been warm earlier that night but cold by morning, how the doctor told her it was fever or suffocation, but that none of it made sense. "They said I was grieving, that I was confused, that I hurt him." Her voice cracked. "I did not." Yates did not say anything at first, just watched her with his hands folded in his lap, firelight casting shadows across his face. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I believe every word you say." She blinked, lips parting, chest tight like she had forgotten how to breathe. "Why?" she whispered. "You do not know me." He gave a slow nod. "I do not need to. I know how folks treat people they do not understand. And I know what real grief sounds like. You are telling the truth." Josephine stared into the fire, her hand curling slightly around the mug in her lap. The quiet between them was not empty. It was safe. He kept coming after that, sometimes with supplies, sometimes just with himself. She began to wait for the sound of hooves. She noticed the way he watched the woods when she walked outside, how he always stood between her and the road. "I do not understand you," she said one night, her voice soft. He smiled, not wide, just enough to crease the corners of his eyes. I do not think you need to. Most men want something. I want peace, he said. You seem to know how to make it. She did not know what to say to that, but she reached for his hand without thinking. He let her. The next morning, she woke to his voice outside. Low, sharp, serious. She stepped out onto the porch with a rifle in her hand. There was a man in a brown coat standing near the fence, not Yates. Another, taller, meaner. I came to see if the liar was still alive, he said, spitting in the dirt. Yates moved between them. You are going to turn around and leave. That your woman now? The man sneered. Yates did not flinch. She is under my roof. That is all you need to know. Josephine did not speak. She just held the rifle steady, aimed at the ground but ready. The man sized them both up, then cursed and turned, boots crunching as he walked back to his horse. Yates waited until he was gone, then turned to her. You know him? He asked. She nodded. He used to work for my husband. He drank too much. Came around after the funeral. Got angry when I told him to go. Yates nodded once. He will not come back. When she stepped toward the edge of the porch, he reached out and caught her hand again. She looked at him. This time he did not let go. I meant what I said, he told her. I believe you. I always will. She felt the warmth of his palm, the steadiness of it. And for the first time since her baby died, she felt something in her chest open again. Not all the way, but enough. Come inside, she said. It is cold. He followed without a word. And this time, when they sat beside the fire, they sat close. For the first time in months, she slept through the night without waking in fear. By early February, the snow had settled into a thick, crusted silence across the prairie, and the river she once waded through ran beneath a skin of dull ice. The wind no longer howled, just whispered through the cottonwoods behind the house, brittle and tired. Yates had taken to splitting firewood behind the shed in the mornings. Not because she asked him to, but because it needed doing and he noticed things like that. He never lingered indoors unless invited, but she found herself opening the door more often. A kind of rhythm had grown between them, quiet, steady, built on small things. That afternoon, Josephine was mending the hem of her only decent shawl when she heard his boots on the porch. She didn't look up until he cleared his throat. I got offered a job, he said, folding his gloves into his belt. Couple miles west. Rancher needs help moving a small herd come spring thaw. She set her needle down. How long would you be gone? Week, maybe less. Depends on weather. Josephine nodded once, but her fingers curled into the wool in her lap. He leaned against the doorframe. I can say no. I wouldn't ask you to do that. I didn't say you would. She met his eyes then. His face was wind-chapped, brow shaded under the brim of his hat. There wasn't a trace of pressure in his voice, just plain truth. Will you come back after? She asked. His gaze didn't shift. If you'll have me. Josephine didn't answer right away. She rose, walked to the window, and brushed aside the curtain. The sun hung low across the drifts, casting long blue shadows. No tracks but his. You don't speak about your people, she said at last. He came to stand beside her, hands tucked behind his back. Not much to speak, he replied. My ma died when I was young. My pa was a hard man. Moved us from camp to camp, job to job. I left before I turned 18. Been on my own since. You never married? No, not for lack of want. Just didn't find a place that felt like mine long enough to ask. She was quiet a moment. And now, he turned fully toward her. Now feels different. She didn't look up, just traced a finger along the frost-laced glass. This place wasn't mine either. Not until you started showing up with flour and kindling like that was all it took to stitch something broken. wasn't just that, he said. You stood tall when you had every reason not to. I saw that. Her throat tightened. I don't know how to be anything else. That's what makes it worth staying for. The wind stirred outside, brushing snow from the eaves. She turned to face him, her arms crossed loosely, not defensive, just unsure. If you go west, I want you to come back. Not just to fix things, but to stay. Yates gave a single nod, solemn and steady. Then I'll come back. And I'll stay. She reached out and let her fingers rest against the back of his hand. The skin there was rough, lined with old work. He didn't move, didn't speak, but the heat of him was enough. Later, she made venison stew from the last of what she dried in autumn. They ate it together, knees brushing under the small table, the oil lamp flickering between them. He asked about the quilt on her bed, and she told him it had been her mother's. He asked nothing more. He never reached too far. That night, as they stood at the door, he pulled his coat close and hesitated. I'll be back before the banks melt. I'll keep the fire going. He looked at her then with something unreadable, something quiet and full. Then he tipped his hat and stepped into the cold. She watched until he disappeared beyond the trees. Only then did she close the door. And for the first time since autumn, she bolted it not out of fear, but habit. The thaw came slower than expected. By the time March settled over the Montana Territory, the banks of the creek had begun to weep beneath the snow, but much of the land still lay under a brittle shell of ice. Josephine took to boiling her wash water in the mornings, steam curling from the copper pot as she worked with sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her hands had grown calloused again, not from neglect, but from keeping pace with the life she was choosing to rebuild. Each day, she checked the road where the trees bent eastward. Each evening, she lit the lamp before dusk and placed it on the sill. On the sixth evening, she heard hoofbeats. She didn't rush. She didn't open the door. She waited until the knock came. When she stepped outside, the wind had turned mild, and Yates stood before her, hat in one hand, saddlebags slung over his shoulder, mud and frost caked along the hem of his coat. You look tired, she said. I brought back maple sugar, he said. Figured you'd be needing something sweet. She smiled, then not wide, not showy, just enough to ease the tightness in her chest. He followed her in without being asked. His boots left a trail on the floorboards, and she didn't mind. He set the bundle on the table and leaned against the wall, watching her light the fire. How was the job? She asked, crouching beside the hearth. Cold. Not much talk. Just work. She nodded. You prefer it that way? I prefer here, he said. She stood and turned, fingers brushing soot from her palms. You're welcome to stay, she said, if that's what you still want. He didn't answer with words. He crossed the room and took her hand. His thumb moved across her knuckles, slow and warm against the places the winter had cracked. I found something, he said after a moment. She looked up, out past the ridge, near the edge of the forest. A baby's cap, stuffed under a pile of brush, mostly rotted through. Josephine didn't speak. Her breath caught, but she kept her eyes on him. I don't know if it was Kellen's, he said, but it wasn't from any of the ranchers. I asked quiet. She stepped back, one hand gripping the chair for balance. I told the sheriff. He said he'd look into it, but his eyes said otherwise. I believe you, she whispered. He nodded. I believe you too. Silence hung between them, but not the kind that asked for distance. It held space. She gathered herself. I don't need them to believe anymore. I only needed one person. You got him. She reached for the edge of the table, fingers brushing the sack he'd brought. Inside, nestled in cloth, were blocks of dark maple sugar, cracked along the edges. You remembered I used to take it in my tea, she said. I remember everything you tell me. She moved to the stove, filled the kettle, and set it to boil. No more words passed between them for a time. Just the soft clink of tin cups and the crackle of the fire. Later, she pulled her chair closer to his, their knees touching. She didn't pull away. Yates, she said, voice low. I'm not the same woman I was last year. I don't know if I'll ever be. I wouldn't ask you to be. I have bad nights. I've seen worse. I don't want someone to fix me. I want to walk beside you, not ahead. She looked at him then, fully, without the shield of grief or fear or hesitation. His face was lined from wind and sun, but his eyes were steady, and there was no pity in them, only something firm and rooted. I want you here, she said. Then I'm home. She leaned forward, and when their foreheads met, the breath between them fogged in the lamplight. He didn't rush her. He never had. They stayed like that until the kettle hissed, and even then, she didn't pull away. Not right away. That night, long after the fire had gone to embers, she lay beside him beneath the quilt her mother had pieced together from old flannel shirts and feed sacks. His arm was heavy around her waist, his breath even against her shoulder. Outside, the snow had begun to melt in earnest, water dripping from the eaves in steady rhythm. And for the first time since she buried her son, Josephine dreamed of spring. By late March, the earth had softened enough for tracks to hold. Mud clung to the soles of their boots, and the smell of thawed soil drifted through the cracks of the cabin walls. Josephine had begun planting onion sets in the small bed beside the house, her skirt hem damp from kneeling. Yates had hauled water from the creek earlier that morning, his shirt damp across the back from the weight of the pails. They were living like two people who had made an unspoken agreement, no ceremony, no declarations, just the folding of daily life into shared space. The lean-to behind the cabin had been patched, and Yates had set up a cot there at first, though it had since gone unused. One morning, Josephine found him sharpening a draw-knife on the porch rail, a half-carved length of pine beside him. You building something? He ran his thumb along the blade's edge. Rocking chair. Thought maybe you'd want one out here. She tilted her head. You ever make one before? No, but I watched a fella do it once back in the Judith Basin. Figured I'd give it a try. She stepped down beside him. All right, but if it topples me backward, I'll hold you responsible. He gave a short laugh. Fair deal. She watched him work for a while, letting the sound of steel on would settle between them. The air was warming, but the trees hadn't budded yet. It was the quiet season between death and bloom. After a while, she spoke. I got a letter yesterday. He looked up. From my cousin in Billings. She wrote me once before after my husband passed, but I never answered. This time she said she heard what the town said. About me. About Kellen. Yates waited. She wants me to come out there. Said she can find me work in a dress shop. Says I could start over. He set the blade down, slow and deliberate. And what do you want? Josephine folded her arms across her waist. I don't know. I used to think starting over meant running somewhere new. But it still follows, doesn't it? The grief. The way people look at you. He nodded once. You're not the one who needs to start over. Just the world around you. She looked down at the carving. The beginnings of a curved rocker were taking shape. I don't want to leave this place, she said. Not anymore. Yates leaned back against the wall, legs stretched out. Then you stay, and if folks still talk, let them. You got a fence, a stove that burns clean, a man who listens. That's more than most. She turned toward him then, and he met her gaze without blinking. You'd stay here with me? She asked. I already am. Josephine stepped forward, her fingers finding his. I don't want to be someone you just protect. I want to build something. Then we'll build it. Slow and sure. No rush. She nodded. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. That evening, Josephine brought out 2 mugs of sassafras tea, and they sat on the porch while the sun dipped behind the trees. The unfinished chair rested beside them, its frame catching the gold light. She leaned her shoulder against his, and he let his hand rest on her knee, light, steady, familiar. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. She watched the horizon, where the sky faded from fire to ash, and thought how strange it was that a season could begin without anyone marking its start. No bells, no announcements. Just the soft click of a draw knife against wood and the sound of 2 people breathing side by side. The rains came in April, soaking the earth clean and steady. The roof held, thanks to the patches Yates had set with pine tar and patience, and Josephine spent most mornings barefoot on the porch, her skirts lifted just enough to keep them from dragging through the puddles. He liked watching her then, quiet and sure, humming low while she shelled beans or trimmed the soft shoots from the herb bed she'd started beside the porch steps. One evening, while the creek rushed fast and full past the cottonwoods, Yates returned from the trading post with a parcel wrapped in oilcloth and a look she hadn't seen before. He set it on the table, wiped his boots, and rested both hands on the back of a chair, waiting. Josephine untied the twine. Inside lay a bolt of soft blue calico, deeper in tone than any fabric she owned. I thought maybe, he said, you could make something for yourself, something you didn't have to mend first. She ran her hand over the cloth. There's enough here for 2 dresses. I figured you'd know what to do with it better than me. She folded the fabric carefully. I never had a man buy cloth for me. You've had men buy you worse. She looked up then, sharp at first, but his expression held no judgment. Just fact. Just knowing. I remember everything I wish I didn't, she said. But I don't carry it on purpose. I know, he said, and you don't have to explain any of it to me. She stepped around the table and took his hand. I want to tell you something, though. He waited. I had plans once, before I married. My mother taught me figures, reading, how to write with a steady hand. I wanted to teach in a town school. I had a letter of agreement from a place near Miles City, but I gave it up when I married. And I never told anyone that. Yates didn't move, but his hand closed gently around hers. You were meant for more than folks allowed you to be. I don't need to be more anymore. I just want to be honest. With myself. With you. He nodded. Then I'll do the same. She watched his eyes shift toward the hearth. Thoughtful. There's a piece of land west of here, he said. Not far. Belongs to an older couple I helped fence in last year. They're moving south to live near their son. They said they'd sell it cheap to someone who'd treat it right. Her brow lifted. You want to buy land? I want to build something with you, not just fix what's broken. Start new. She didn't speak right away. She let the words settle between them, let them wrinkle the quiet like a stone dropped in still water. I've never had a home that was mine, she said. Only one's built around someone else's life. Then let's build one around ours. That night, she brought out the tin box beneath her bed. From it, she laid out her saved bills, every coin she hadn't needed to spend. Take this, she said. It's not much, but it's part of it. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He slid the money into his satchel and kissed her hand. Once, firm and slow. By the time May warmed the hills, the land was theirs. 10 acres, with a creek running through the back and a stand of black spruce along the edge. The cabin would take time to build. Yates drew sketches at the table by lamplight, Josephine leaning over his shoulder, her braid brushing his collarbone as she traced the lines with her fingertip. They moved slowly, hauling boards with borrowed mules, digging post holes by hand. She planted seeds along the edge of the new clearing, beans, squash, and wildflowers, and he strung wire along the fence line, measuring each post with care. One evening, while they stood beneath the open sky, stars blinking out one by one, he took her hand and pressed something into it. A ring, plain and wide, the silver dulled from age. "It was my mother's," he said. "I kept it through everything." Josephine turned it in her fingers. "It's beautiful. It's not much. It's everything." He slipped it onto her finger. They married under the cottonwoods, just the two of them, with a pledge spoken low and sure, nothing borrowed, nothing blue, only what they had built with their own hands. She wore a dress she had sewn from the blue calico. He wore the same coat he first arrived in, now patched at the elbows. Later, they sat on the porch of the old cabin, their tools resting beside the door, the new frame of their home rising in the west meadow, not yet roofed but standing. "You think it'll last?" she asked, her head resting against his shoulder. "I've never been more sure of anything." A breeze lifted her braid, and he tucked it back behind her ear. "What will we do when winter comes again?" "Same thing we did this time," she said. "Only together." Years passed. The cabin stood through snow, wind, and years of lean harvest. They never had much, but they had enough. The rocking chair he built sat beside the hearth, worn smooth at the arms. She taught a handful of children in the next valley, lessons written in careful script on a slate board. He raised chickens, broke horses, and never left without kissing her goodbye. They were never rich in coin, but the house stood, the roof held, and the fire never went out. At night, he read aloud from the Bible or from letters sent by her cousin in Billings, while she mended shirts or shelled beans. They laughed more than they cried. They slept close. She never forgot her son. But she no longer woke with guilt choking her throat. She visited the grave each spring, flowers laid down with a quiet prayer. Yates never intruded, but he always walked her there. They lived long and steady and loved each other without condition. And when the world changed around them, when rail lines came closer and towns grew louder, they stayed rooted in the place they'd chosen. Together, always, and they were happy.